Well, welcome to QX Church. You find us online at qxchurch.org, and of course, I'm Pastor Scott Conway. And today's probably less of a lesson, more of just a chat. I actually taught the Christmas lesson last week, so we're kind of doubling up a little bit this year, which is a little unusual for us. But today, it's more, talking about things, sharing some things. There's one of the questions that comes up from time to time, and in this day of social media, you see probably a lot more of it running around than you might normally have encountered in ages past, and certainly generations past, about Christmas, about the origins of Christmas, about what's pagan, what's Christian. Hey, December 25th, this is Jesus' birthday anyway. The war on Christmas, and just all of these things that are made into issues. And we'll talk about a couple of them kind of informally today. One of them is the fact that December 25th isn't Jesus' birthday. How do we arrive at September 25th? Well, it's fairly well known that it was a pagan winter solstice celebration. But there's actually more to it than that. I'm going to need my glasses a bit more today, probably than usual. Now, the first recorded date of Christmas being celebrated on December 25th was in 336 AD, during the time of the Roman Emperor Constantine. And he was the first Christian Roman emperor. Some people trace the popularity of Christianity to Constantine, which is certainly true. And a lot of others trace the corruption of Christianity to Constantine. And of course, that's debatable. I mean, there's some people who believe that him becoming a Christian is what's responsible for all of the pagan traditions being folded into Christianity, and that it tainted Christianity forever, only to be recovered at, whenever, the particular church or denomination that believes that they're the ones that have it right came along. But then the Roman Emperor Constantine, Jesus' birthday was first celebrated on December 25th. Now, here's one of the challenges we face with this date. We don't know when Jesus was born. It's not just that we're pretty sure he probably wasn't born on December 25th. It's that we really don't know. So we have biblical scholars that go scouring the Bible record to try to figure this date out. And they still don't know. I mean, there's no consensus on the date. There's some pretty good guesses, and there's some ideas. And some think spring, some think fall, some have dates in the summertime. And there's a number of calculations people make for that to try to arrive at particular dates. But what it basically boils down to is we don't know. We can have some confidence it's probably not December 25th, just because it would have been winter, it would have been difficult to travel, it would have been a very unusual time to hold a census and make everyone go back to their hometowns when it's winter. That the sheep probably wouldn't have been out in the field in the winter. And so a lot of the things that happened probably wouldn't have been occurring if it was winter in Israel. So we can be reasonably confident it wasn't December 25th. So how did we arrive at December 25th? Well, the story you probably heard is there's a Roman festival called Saturnalia. And the Roman festival of Saturnalia typically took place between what on our modern calendar would be between December 17th and December 23rd. And it was to honor the Roman god Saturn. Something that's a little less known is there was something called the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, or Invicti. Honestly, my Latin's not any good. And that means the birthday of the unconquered sun, and it was celebrated on December 25th. And this was the official birthday of the pagan sun god, Mithra. And so when they were celebrating the birthday of the unconquered sun on December 25th, part of the pagan religion of Mithraism, that was an easy day to adopt. Now, the holy day in Mithraism is Sunday. And what is the traditional, holy day or, celebration day for Christianity? Also on Sunday. That we celebrate Sunday because that's the day of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So the last day of the week, if you were a Christian Jew, if you were one of the earliest converts from Judaism, you might be in the synagogue on Saturday and you'd be in church on Sunday. because Jesus Christ was your Messiah. He was the one you had been waiting for. But it didn't necessarily mean you were any less Jewish. I mean, that this even caused controversy in the early days of the church, because there was a question about how much of the Jewish heritage of Christendom now comes over to the Gentiles. A lot of the Jewish Christians would still practice a lot of the Jewish rites, and Paul and Peter got into it a bit, because Peter was kind of sliding back into kind of a Messianic Judaism, and was kind of distancing himself from the Gentiles. And this became an issue. But Sunday has always been the traditional meeting day of Christianity. It's in the book of Acts talking about meeting on the first day of the week. And so there was always some overlap. Now, whether Mithraism always did Sunday, or whether Mithraism kind of, merged in because they were both doing Sunday, or whether Mithraism adopted Sunday because that's what these other groups were doing, we don't know. I mean, we weren't there, so we can just go by scant pieces of information here and there. But to the early Christians, you're talking about the unconquered Son, that it's an unconquered Son of a different sort, and to celebrate the birth of the Son of God instead of the Son God. And so in the Bible prophecy about the Jewish Savior who Christians believe is Jesus is called the Son of Righteousness. Now, not just Son, S-O-N, of righteousness, as what you might think, but the Son, S-U-N, the light in the sky of righteousness. Now, there was already the Jewish Festival of Lights. Now, Hanukkah, you won't find Hanukkah in the Bible if you have a Protestant Bible. You actually won't find the holiday Hanukkah in the Bible, but you'll find the story in the Bible if you have the Catholic or Orthodox Bible. The book of Maccabees tells the story of the Maccabean Revolution. Now, there's a story in this revolution that they only had 1 day of oil. They were in hiding, and it lasted for 8 days. And this became the Festival of Lights, a celebration of the preservation of Judaism under oppression. And that is called the Festival of Lights because you're celebrating the lasting of the candle, the oil for the lamps. And that is typically celebrated on the 25th of Kislev, which is the month in the Jewish calendar that occurs commonly about the same time as December. Now, the Jewish calendar has some idiosyncrasy, so the months kind of move around some. Because while we do leap years with an extra day, they do special kind of leap years, sometimes with an extra month. And so they handle the leap year situation differently. So you had the Festival of Lights. You have this Festival of the Unconquered Sun. You have a celebration of the winter solstice. Actually, I didn't talk about that yet. You have the celebration of the Festival of Saturnalia. And you have the celebration of the winter solstice. Now, what's, of course, key about the winter solstice celebrations is the darkness has come to an end. It's no longer getting darker. Now it's starting to get lighter. It's gotten as dark as it's going to get at whenever the winter solstice is. Now, the Romans thought it was about December 25th. And, that's pretty close. And so with the winter solstice actually occurring, around the 22nd, by the 25th, the days are becoming noticeably longer. So for those people measuring these, even by the measuring systems that we had available thousands of years ago, that they recognize the days are getting longer now. And since the days are getting longer now, they realize, okay, the darkness has ended. It's no longer getting darker. It's now getting lighter. The light is coming. The days are getting longer. We're now heading into the time of greater illumination, of greater sight, of more light earlier, more light later. And so there's a lot of metaphors here, so that when the Christians were looking for a date, there's a lot of things in here that kind of made sense. Now, one of the big objections is that, well, you're talking about a lot of pagan traditions. And, they just chose the date so they could conscript this one particular holiday. Well, that's not necessarily true, because, of course, as we just discussed, there's a lot of different things going on here. But there's something else that a lot of times, we overlook, and that just flat out don't know. There is something in the Bible called the Annunciation. Now, if you have never heard that term, you probably heard the story. The Annunciation is when the angel appears to Mary and tells Mary that she's going to have the baby. Now, the traditional celebration date of the Annunciation that predates the celebration of Christmas was March 25th. So they were already celebrating the Annunciation or honoring the Annunciation on the 25th of March. There's another tradition that says the Annunciation isn't just when the angel showed up, but also is when Mary became pregnant with the Son of God. And so that when without any intercourse taking place, that by supernatural intervention, and think about how little this actually takes, that Mary had an egg that suddenly became fertile. Now consider for a moment if Jesus is a male version of a clone of Mary. And you just take all of Mary's genetics and you put in the egg, how much is necessary for that to become a boy child? Essentially, all God would have to do is do a unique genesis of an egg, keep all of Mary's genetic material, drop that second X, and create a Y chromosome. And so it's biologically not as massive a deal as, say, making a universe. I mean, it's this fairly tiny thing that's information rich. So if you're going to create a heavens and an earth, you're going to create an entire ecosystem. You're going to create suns and moons and stars. You're going to create oceans and mountains. You're going to create valleys and foliage and plants and animals and human beings. By comparison, creating a Y chromosome is a fairly tiny task. The biggest deal isn't the creation of the biology. The biggest deal is the enormity of God being pinpointed to one particular spot in time and space. And that date when that happened is called the Annunciation, and it was traditionally already celebrated on March 25th. Now, they understood pregnancy takes about 9 months. So you take March 25th with the Annunciation, you assume Mary got pregnant on your traditional date, because we don't know. We really don't know. And so if Mary did get pregnant on the traditional date of March 25th, and she was pregnant for exactly 9 months, when will she give birth? Well, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. December. I almost missed a month there. And she'd give birth on December 25th. And so completely apart from conscripting, the elements of these other holidays, completely apart from having a winter solstice time celebration, just moving forward to include a birthday celebration for Jesus when you're already honoring the Annunciation to Mary, when you're already honoring the angel showing up to tell Mary that she would give birth to the Christ, you just fast forward 9 months and that becomes your natural celebration date, completely apart from Saturnalia, completely apart from Mithra, completely apart from the winter solstice, just by going from a traditional date of something already being honored and adding that. And that's something that a lot of us have never heard before. And certainly you don't see it being posted all over social media. Now, something else that is certainly true about Christmas, especially as we celebrate it in the modern era, is that we did adopt a lot of pagan traditions. We did adopt a lot of secular traditions. There's a lot of things in the way Christmas is celebrated right here, right now, in the early 21st century that would be a little bit different than things would have been done thousands of years ago, and certainly the actual birth of the actual Christ when he was born in the manger. Now, why do we do this? Well, first off, some of this is encouraged by the original church. But we're going to go to something that is from 601 AD. So this isn't quite at the very beginning, this isn't the apostle, but this is a pope. We're going to talk about what a pope had to say about 1400 years ago. So this is Pope Gregory, sometimes called Pope Gregory the Great. In 601 AD, this is something he wrote: "The idol temples of that race should by no means be destroyed, but only the idols in them." So what he's talking about is when people are converting to Christianity from other religions, when they have other gods, they have other idols, they have other things that they're using as the object of worship or as their reminder of who they're worshiping. Pope Gregory the Great says, don't destroy the temples, only destroy the idols. It says, take holy water and sprinkle it in these shrines, build altars and place relics in them. So basically what he's saying is purify it, sanctify it, and convert it. So if the people are being converted, also convert their shrines. When the people see that their shrines are not destroyed, they shall be able to banish error from their hearts and be more ready to come to the places they are familiar with, but now recognizing and worshiping the true God. Thus, while some outward rejoicings are preserved, they will be more easily able to share in inward rejoicings. So that's Pope Gregory the Great, even encouraging the continuation of some pagan traditions. And essentially what his point was, is there's a lot of things that people do as part of their celebrations that, yes, is connected to older practices, but if the practice itself is not a problem, in fact, the practice itself might even be pointing to the worship of the true God in some way, shape, or form. And there's no need to eradicate everything. Now, he says there's some things that are essential to eradicate. And you know, he refers to the idols, and in this case he's probably talking literally about actual idols, actual icons, actual statues, actual objects of worship. But the idea here that he's presenting is we don't have to destroy everything. If we can make use of it to better reach these people, and it's a very kind of Paul at Mars Hill kind of approach. Right? What is it that they're already doing that is already close enough to the truth that it can be part of a bridge to help them get to the truth? What are they already doing? What do they already know? What do they already understand? What's already important to them? What already resonates with their lives? What already resonates with their hearts? What already is a part of their culture that can help them come to worship the true God, that can help them connect with Christ. And we don't have to destroy all of it, we only have to destroy the part that is a clear and present danger to the trueness of their faith. And that was basically his approach. And so if you run into something and you can make use of it, that's perfectly okay. And even by the time he's talking here, it's a 200, 250-year-old tradition to be doing this. So years before, when Constantine became a Christian, one of the things you can do is you look at this winter solstice celebration. You fast forward 9 months from the Annunciation, okay, December 25th, that happens to land on the exact same date of the Mithra festival for the unconquered sun. It happens to land where they thought the winter solstice was, of the end of things getting darker and the beginning of things getting lighter. It's also around the festival of Saturnalia, of celebrating Saturn, and the festival of, you know, not the unconquered sun, but the festival they already celebrated, they already honored, they already had a time here. And what in these festivals, what in these celebrations can we use then to reach them? To start where they are. What is their version of the altar to the unknown God? What can we do to be all things to all people that we can reach all people? What in here needs to be set aside, needs to be destroyed, needs to be cleansed, because it will necessarily pull them away from Christ? And what in here can remain and now be used as a bridge to Christ, as something that will help support their faith? And there's a principle that all truth is God's truth. And that if all truth is God's truth, and if in many of these religions you find some element of truth, can we use this idea to help them get to Christ? Now, in ancient mythology, someone that's gotten more popular recently is Thor. Thanks to Marvel Comics and the movies and the Avengers and, you know, the Thor movies, a lot more people now know Thor than probably ever knew Thor before, and a lot more people know who Odin is than probably ever knew Odin before. Well, there's a few interesting things about Thor and Odin. Odin in Norse mythology is their High Father, or their All Father, their High God, their Sky God. And Odin rules in Asgard. Thor is Odin's son. Now, something that isn't commonly known about Thor, because you don't see this in the comic books and you don't see this in the movies, is that Thor's mother is mortal. So you have Thor, who is fighting on behalf of humanity. He's the defender of Midgard. He's the defender of Earth. He's here to save and protect Earth in the very kind of Norse fashion, as the son of the High God and a human woman. Now, in Norse fashion, when you're doing this, it's much more brutal than we would imagine it today, and it's certainly not quite in total harmony with the Christian story, but you see there's already an overlap. So if you just knew that far, and some of you knew you were talking to people who understood this mythology, or even already believed this mythology, could you use that as part of a bridge? To tell them there's a true story here connected to these stories. That there is a Father in heaven who is truly almighty, who is the creator of the heavens and the earth, who is so far above all gods, he is called the God of gods. However much you might revere Odin as All-Father, there is a God that is so far above Odin that Odin would revere him as All-Father. And that God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, also had a son. And much as you understand, Odin had a son with a human woman, and Thor became a guardian of Midgard, that the true God, the heavenly Father, also had a son by a human woman. And he came to save the earth, to save you, to deliver you from your sins, not as a warrior, but as a savior. Not as one who is going to destroy your enemies, as you might normally think of salvation, but as one who is coming to deliver you into paradise. You understand already that if a warrior dies heroically in battle, he is delivered to Valhalla. That in true Christianity, Christ did not come to deliver you into Valhalla for your warriorship on the field of battle that you died to, but he came that you can die to sin and live a righteous life and be ushered into heaven, because he conquered death. That he didn't make you die and make you fight a glorious battle. He conquered death for you and says, will you join me? And you can see that the story can be close enough already that you can use that as a cultural bridge to be able to bring Christianity to the Vikings, to bring Christianity to people who already believe in Odin and Thor and Valhalla. The Thor story actually is a little bit more interesting because there's this thing called Ragnarok. Now, depending when you're seeing this video or listening to this audio, the Thor movie coming up next is scheduled to be called Ragnarok. Now, we don't know anything about it right now. If you're watching or listening to this after the movies come out, well then you know. Right now we don't. But short version, what Ragnarok is, it's their end times. And at their end times, Thor is the one that steps up to defend the world. And he's defending the world against this creature called the Midgard serpent, the serpent of the earth, the serpent who surrounds the earth. In the Bible, we also have a serpent. And we have this serpent we commonly call the devil, the tempter, the secret guardian man who tempted Eve. He is also a serpent, and he is also called the God of this world. And he holds sway over the world. And that there was a time, we are told, that he stood with Jesus on the pinnacle of the temple, and he offered him the nations of the world if only Jesus would bow down to him. And Jesus did not dispute Satan's authority to give him the nations of the world. And he's called the God of this world. If only Jesus would short-circuit his quest to save earth by the will of God the Father and bow his will to the devil. That is our Midgard serpent. And that the Son of God, not Thor, the son of Odin, Jesus Christ, the Son of the Creator God, who is a God so high that Odin would regard him as the All-Father. that he also will do battle with the devil at the end of time. And he also will crush the devil's head. As we are told that the devil shall bruise his heel, but he shall crush his head. And just as your story says that Thor will crush the head of the Midgard serpent, but in your story, the poison of the Midgard serpent kills Thor. In the reality of Christ, it was the machinations of the devil that killed Christ thousands of years ago, or depending when, if you're talking the Vikings, hundreds of years ago. But thousands of years ago, and he came back. He died and he was resurrected in triumph over death. So much of your story is close. So much of your story gives you enough to understand. And in the story of Ragnarok, the world that comes after is a glorious world. It's a paradise. And the world that comes after the salvation of Jesus Christ is a glorious world. It is a paradise. Now, what have we been doing in all of these stories? Pagan traditions connected to Odin and Thor and connecting them to Christianity. Basically doing what Pope Gregory was talking about. Basically doing what was being done under Constantine. Basically doing exactly what Paul did at Mars Hill. You start where they're at, and you use what they already know, what they already believe, what they already understand, and you bring it in and you help walk them to the truth. And if it does no harm, basic silver rule, first do no harm. If it does no harm, then there's no harm in allowing it. Now, some people get really bent out of shape over some of these things. That they want anything and everything that has any connection to anything pagan or potentially pagan to be cleansed from the church. That to them, if anything unholy touches the holy, it forever poisons and taints that which is holy. Pope Gregory disagreed. The church fathers under Constantine disagreed. Paul seems to disagree. But it is a perspective to be held, because those who focus their attention on be ye holy, and that's their focus, they're seeking the holiness of God, they're seeking Christ-likeness, they're seeking that purity, that is a completely and totally valid approach to walking out your faith. To say all things pagan, all things that aren't exclusively Christian, I want to cleanse from my life. I want to get rid of all of those things so that the life I'm leading is solely and exclusively Christian. And I put a wall of separation between me and the world around me so that I might be within the world physically, but not be of the world, because I keep the world at a distance. And it is very easy, relatively speaking, to lead a holy life by doing this. You just keep everything away. Now, these are the people that find it useful to get rid of all secular music. If it's not Christian music, it's not allowed. Some go so far as to say, even if there's certain types of beats that some people will refer to as satanic beats or worldly beats, that those rhythms, those drum beats, aren't permitted either. And if you come from a tradition that says, the dancing is too sensuous and it leads to temptation and such, basically anything you can dance to then becomes necessarily worldly, necessarily carnal, and you keep that stuff away. Very often these people will work in ministry, they'll work in Christian businesses, they insulate themselves from the world. They only make contact with the world in the form of outreach, in the form of mission trip, in the form of evangelism, but they insulate themselves. And that is a very valid way to live. It's a lot like if you're on a diet. If you're on a healthy diet, is it easier to be on a healthy diet if you're surrounded by junk food all the time, or is it easier to be on a healthy diet if the only food you have in your house is healthy food? It's much easier to be on a diet if the only food in your house is healthy food. If every food you have access to is going to support the healthy lifestyle you are seeking to live, if everything you have available to put in your body is going to feed your health, fuel your body, and nothing's going to be junk food, it's a lot easier to stick to your diet. Of course it is. And if you go out to eat and you take your own food with you and you never partake of restaurant food because you don't know for sure everything that's in there sometimes, or you only go to certain restaurants, and we got a couple of good health food restaurants that serve incredibly healthy food, and those are the only places you ever go, is a lot easier to stick to your diet. Absolutely. Now, if on the other hand, then you come with me to Cheesecake Factory and I introduce you to what's still really, really good food, not terribly unhealthy food, but it doesn't fit the lifestyle you're trying to live. Might that get to be a little more difficult for you? If I have my spicy cashew chicken and you smell it, you go, oh my gosh, that smells delicious. If you're watching me eat a slice of cheesecake and you're looking at it, it's like, oh boy, that looks tasty, and I offer you a bite, might it be a lot harder to stick to your diet? So is it valid to have a spiritual diet? Is it valid to say, I don't want to have anything to do with any of those pagan things because it's tempting? I want to live a physically pure life, so I make sure I only have physically pure food around me. I want to live a spiritually pure life, so I want spiritually pure, cleansed things around me. That's valid. Now, it's not the way we do things, but that is valid. And just as we validate legalism, it has its place. We validate this kind of living in a Christian bubble because it has its place. For people who are seeking to do that, it's a good thing to kind of get a bubble around you. So we talk about like living in the bubble, the boy in the bubble thing, where he couldn't handle the ordinary, exposure to things in, day-to-day life. And so he lived in the bubble. And everything was cleansed before it got to him, so nothing would make him sick. And so that's where we get the term of living in the bubble. But there's valid times to be living in a bubble. And sort of depending upon where you are and what you're doing, you will insulate yourselves in different ways. And sometimes it's not even just to hide from anything, it's to make sure you are thoroughly and deeply connected with what serves you. Now, a more common variation of this we might see is our servicemen and women. When our families go traveling and they're stationed in a country that doesn't primarily speak English, and even where most of the people might not speak English, that they have their bubble, kind of their zone where they know, okay, so long as we stay in this area geographically, so long as we work with these people and organizations, we'll have people who speak English. We have people who have some understanding of American culture. We have people who generally won't be offended by reasonably polite American culture. But if we go beyond that, we might run into some of these problems. And so long as we stay in this zone, we insulate ourselves from the culture around us enough so we understand if we're going to go out there, we have to connect with them on their terms. So long as we stay in here, we can connect with one another and those who come in this zone on American terms. Terms we already understand, ways we already know how to do things, ways we already know how things work. And so we do this in the secular world too. So it's not like it's an exclusively Christian thing. And some people take it to extremes. Some people do a little bit of it. Some people do a lot of it. At the very least, we ought to be coming into a zone where we can fellowship, a place where we are able to connect with fellow Christians, places where we can have Christian conversations, Christian discussion, Christian debates even. Iron sharpens iron. And so there are things that we do like this. Now, at our church, we're not afraid of the pagan traditions. And so we're not afraid of things. We do more like the Mars Hill, and we bring things in. And so even though Christmas might have coincided with the Festival of Saturnalia, even though it might have coincided with the Mithra Festival of the Unconquered Sun, even though it may have coincided with the winter solstice and the days now getting longer, we are celebrating the birth of Christ. Even though we can be pretty sure the actual birth of Christ was not on December 25th. And now we know, and a lot of people don't, so by all means feel free to share this on social media, that December 25th wasn't just arrived at by saying, well, we need something to coincide with all these other pagan holidays. Let's do the birthday of Jesus and we'll just stick it there. That it was arrived at also by adding 9 months to the Annunciation, which was already being celebrated and honored. Now, there's a lot of other interesting things and ideas that we pick. One of them that I've been visiting more recently is just the simple thing of mistletoe. Where did that come from? Well, the custom of kissing under mistletoe comes from England. And so that's kind of where we got it from. Now, the original custom was that you picked a berry from a sprig of mistletoe before the person could be kissed, and when all the berries had gone, there could be no more kissing. The kissing was done. But until all the berries were picked, you could kiss under the mistletoe. Now, presumably, if you're already married, husband and wife, or you're already sweethearts, whatever level of public displays of affection were appropriate in the particular culture of the moment would be okay. But this gave you special permission, just like there was an old English tradition of May Day. And May Day was considered an opportunity, or the lusty month of May. You may see this in the show Camelot. Was an opportunity where some of the rules were relaxed for a short period of time. Mistletoe is also hung on an old English decoration called the kissing bough. Now, some of this comes from an old Norse tradition. And in the Norse tradition, you would use mistletoe also as something for kissing. And so, how did we get it? Well, we basically conscripted it, decided that there wasn't any big problem with, a kiss. I mean, the Bible itself says, greet one another with a holy kiss, which implies there's an unholy level of a kiss. But certain things we decided we were going to make okay, and possibly, honestly, to facilitate courting and whatnot. And, and the Christmas tree. The Christmas tree has a possibly long and tangled history. Ancient Romans and Greeks decorated their homes with evergreen branches. There's even a Roman mosaic depicting the god Dionysus, the god of basically hard partying. And the god Dionysus was what appears to be an early version of what we would possibly refer to as a Christmas tree. Evergreens were used. And no one's really sure if they used entire trees other than this one picture of Dionysus that we have. And so ultimately, is it pagan or is it Christian? Does that mean that Christians aren't allowed to have pine trees? Or is it permissible? And how do we use it? How do we celebrate it? Now, some of these, the first Christmas tree dates back to the early 1520s in Germany and spread from there. And so this isn't an ancient tradition, and we just sort of started doing it later. This isn't something we've been doing through all of Christian history. And you'll find this all over the place. There's tons of Christian traditions. And some of them are just purely secular. We pick them up like in the 20th century stuff happened. And we think that's perfectly okay. So in short, whatever your Christian traditions are, whatever the traditions are that came down through your family, we're in favor of those. And just enjoy your Christmas. So wrap up very quickly, just say Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.